Welcome back to Capitol Tonight, a statewide look at politics. I'm Tim Boehm. Our featured guest tonight is Marc Levin. He's the Senior Policy Advisor for Right on Crime. In simple terms, it's a conservative group looking to reform crime fighting. Right on Crime is a project of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. The group is in town for a specific piece of legislation in North Carolina. Mr. Levin joins me now with more on that. Thanks for joining us. Now, North Carolina and New York, the only two states where 16, 17-year-olds are automatically tried in adult court. You're looking to change that.
Yeah, these are only two states where 16-year-olds are automatically sent to adult court. States differ when it comes to 17-year-olds, although most treat them as juveniles. And what we're here to say is the juvenile justice system is really much better situated to deal with a 16-year-old. And what we're only talking about here today are misdemeanors. That's the bill that's on the table. So recently a 16-year-old stole a bag of Doritos here in North Carolina. And the question is, do we want the juvenile justice system, which works to strengthen the family, which really provides the discipline 16-year-olds need, do we want them to handle it, or do we want to throw that 16-year-old into an adult county jail with a bunch of hardened adult criminal offenders, and they can learn the worst tricks of the trade? So clearly the juvenile justice system is what's the system that's better situated to deal with them and make sure they don't have a permanent criminal record for stealing that bag of Doritos such they can't get a job when they're 50 years old.
And I've also seen some statistics where there's some belief that the reoffense rate is higher for those juveniles if they end up in adult court systems.
Yes, we've reviewed a number of studies, which we highlight in a report we just issued with the John Locke Foundation, our conservative counterpart here. And they show, in looking at thousands of cases in New Jersey, New York, other states, that when you send these youths to the adult system, particularly adult prisons, they have much higher recidivism rate, almost double. And we think that's because the adult prisons simply don't have the right programs, and they're in with very hardened adult offenders. And 16-year-old is very vulnerable. They have much higher rate of being raped in adult prisons.
This is always, you know, when you're talking about legislatures, it becomes a political issue. Where have you noticed in different states where both sides are sitting on this issue?
Well, the great thing is we're seeing incredible momentum, bipartisan, and particularly an increased number of conservative legislators in North Carolina are embracing this. And so it's really exciting, and frankly, it builds on some of the progress that we've seen in other aspects of juvenile and adult criminal justice reform that have been very successful in North Carolina in the last few years, and that we've seen sweeping the country. Governor Kasich in Ohio, Governor Deal in Georgia, very conservative governors are saying we need to be both tough and smart on criminal justice, and they're looking to Right on Crime, our organization, because we've had Jeb Bush, Newt Gingrich, the former drug czar Bill Bennett, all sign our statement of principles. And these aren't people that are soft on crime by any means, but they want to look at what works, what's going to turn these 16-year-olds around so they move on to being productive, law-abiding citizens, not career criminals. And the juvenile justice system can do that.
Now, one of the groups in this state that is not for it, at least at this time, is the Sheriff's Association. They have a stake in this, obviously, and they're concerned that there's no plan to transfer all these teenagers back into the juvenile system, that it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to build new facilities and move them. What do you say to that, I guess?
Well, we actually had a news conference with a former sheriff today who's supporting this. So there's a diversity of opinion among law enforcement, but the bill as it stands now is only dealing with misdemeanors. So we're not talking about any youths that commit violent offenses. They would all, 16 and 17-year-olds would still go to the adult system for any felony. So the misdemeanors aren't going to state incarceration anyway. And the interesting thing is last week, the federal government issued a mandatory prison rape prevention standards. And what those standards say for the first time is that 16 and 17-year-olds must be kept separate from adults in all correctional facilities, separate from older inmates, and they must be given programming, education, rehabilitation programming. So they can't just be put in solitary confinement for 23 hours. Now, what that means for North Carolina is county adult jails would have to spend lots of money building separate wings and rooms for 16 and 17-year-olds, both to hold them and to deliver programming. Huge expense for counties, for county sheriffs to modify their adult county jails. So we can actually save money by having these misdemeanants booked into juvenile detention if they need to stay there, and if they need longer term, there's juvenile facilities that can do that. But most of the people we're talking about, the misdemeanors, because that's all we're talking about, are getting juvenile probation. Juvenile probation works with the families, works with the school systems to get these kids back on the right track.
Marc Levin, Senior Policy Advisor, thank you so much with Right on Crime. I appreciate your time, and welcome to North Carolina.
Thank you for having me.